Hi and welcome to this new video, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the effects of camera angle once more, but we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of a very experienced flyer versus a beginner. And the reason I want to do this is because what I want to illustrate is that what you see when you watch a video of a very experienced flyer flying is not necessarily what you think. And I'll expand on that as we go, but first of all I want to cover a little bit of science here with regard to cameras and just show, again like I have done in previous videos, some of what is going on. So if we just get this quad into a position where I can lock it, not quite that high, let's come down a bit, there, right. Got a nice multi-GP gate in the background there. Right, what I want to show here is I've got my camera, let's shut the motors off. I've got my camera angle here set at 0, and that's completely on purpose because I want to illustrate what is going on with my camera when the camera's axis is exactly aligned with the quad. So if we go back to line of sight view, what we've effectively got here is, ignore the fact that the graphics here is showing the camera at 45 degrees. The camera is actually pointing directly in the direction that the quad is travelling. So if we were to turn this quad to face us like this, imagine that the camera is just pointing, just angle this down slightly so these props are in line. So imagine that the camera is pointing straight at us. It's not pointing up at 45 degrees, it's pointing straight at us along the axis of the quad. And the effect this creates is that if you are to roll the quad like this, you can see that that would be also rolling the camera, because the camera axis is exactly the same as the quad axis. And we can see that if we go to line of sight, sorry, not line of sight, to FPV mode, and if I turn my sticks on here, you can see that as I roll left and right, the only thing that's going on is the camera is rolling on an axis going straight through the middle of the lens in the direction we're facing. There's no other interactions going on, we're just rolling around the axis of the lens. Okay, if we now look at yaw, when we yaw, you can effectively draw a line vertically down through the camera, and we're just rotating around that vertical axis. So we're literally just looking where the quad is pointing, because our camera is basically pointing straight out the front of the quad. So again, if I yaw, we can see that that is exactly what is happening. If I can see, I'm just using the yaw stick here, and round and round we go, and there's no other interaction. The only thing that happens is that we yaw around a axis passing vertically through the camera. Okay, so that we understand. Now let's imagine for a moment that the camera is at 90 degrees. So it's actually pointing straight up out of the middle of the quad. Now nobody flies with a 90-degree camera angle, but I just want to use this as an example to illustrate something. If the camera is pointing at 90 degrees straight up, you can see that yaw will now look like roll. If you were looking out of the camera, and unfortunately in Velocitron we can't actually set a 90-degree camera angle, I think it goes up to about 70, yeah. So we can only go to 70, but you can kind of see some of this in that if I yaw, if I tip the camera down so it's looking where we're going, so that my horizon is in the middle of the screen like that, and I now yaw, you can see it looks like roll. Now if it was at 90 degrees it would be perfect roll that we would see when we're yawing. I want to show this here on the sticks. This is yaw that I'm doing now, not roll. And look what happens when I roll. It looks like yaw. Now if it was 90 degrees it would look like perfect yaw, even though I'm rolling. So what's the point of all this? Why am I telling you this? Well, the reason I'm telling you this is that if you are watching a pilot flying and you can't see the sticks, and let's say their camera angle is at about, say, 60 degrees, which could well be the case for a very fast professional pilot, when they come to do their turns, they're going to roll the quad just like you do as a beginner, but you can see it doesn't look like the quad has rolled, not particularly. It looks like the quad has yawed. So when you watch them flying around a track, you're going to believe, if you can't see the sticks, that they're actually using yaw to make the turns, but they're not. This is the roll stick that I'm using. See this? This is the roll. It's not yaw at all. Okay, so with that in mind, let's just unlock the quad, and I'm just going to fly with 60-degree camera angle around this course. And you can see this looks like, I won't fly through the gates, just to fly over the top of them, but you can see it looks like I'm using yaw to make my turns, like I was flying a tiny whoop. But actually I'm using roll mainly to make my turns, but the quad isn't rolling because my camera angle is so high that roll looks like yaw. And this of course leads to all kinds of common mistakes from beginners watching videos of professional pilots flying, thinking that the way that they're managing to go around these corners is with using yaw, but actually they're using roll to go around the corners, just like you would if you were at a lower camera angle. It's just that at this high camera angle you actually get much less roll of the quad. When you roll, you get yaw instead, and actually this is very, very helpful because it keeps the quad flat. You can see how my quad is staying really flat as I'm flying over these gates rather than through them, because I don't want to crash because they're quite small. But as I fly around this course, you can see that my quad really doesn't roll very much at all. Even though I'm using roll to make these turns, the quad isn't rolling very much. It's staying very, very flat. And actually that's really helpful in keeping control of the quad, because that high camera angle allows me to roll the quad but not get excessive roll on the camera. So I'm getting all the benefits of using roll to get me around the corners without all the disadvantages of the camera actually rolling and the whole world tilting while I'm doing that. So just to demonstrate, if I now stop and just bring my camera back down to a kind of a beginner's angle and fly the course in the same way, using the same sort of stick movements, you'll see that there's loads and loads now of roll on the camera. Lots and lots of roll and lots of tilting of the camera as I fly around this course. And that's because the axis of the camera is more aligned to the roll axis of the quad, and therefore I get much more tilting of the quad as I fly around the course. So all this is really designed to illustrate that if you're watching an FPV video of a professional pilot flying and they appear to be flying very, very flat and not rolling the quad but seem to be making all of their turns on yaw, then it's very unlikely that that is the case. It's much more likely. See, when I introduce yaw, that actually rolls. So if I don't actually touch the yaw stick very much, which is quite difficult to do, so I'm used to coordinating my controls. But if you don't actually touch the stick very much, you get really quite flat turns. And it's much easier to line up on gates when the quad stays flat like this. It's easier to see where you're going and control the quad. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating that everyone should be flying around at 60 degrees camera angle. However, What I would say is that as you move up the camera angles and you go beyond 45 degrees up into the 50s and the 60s, it does allow for the quad to fly in a much more flat fashion without all of that roll on the camera axis, and that does make it easier to line up and get through gates. Anyway, that was the point of this video, was to just kind of illustrate that what you see may not be what you think when you're watching quad flight videos, and you do need to take into account that whenever you're watching a video you don't know what the camera angle the pilot has set. You can get a reasonably good idea by looking at the props, if the props are in view in relation to the ground and the camera, but at high camera angles typically you will not see the props at all, and that's normally a fairly good clue of a high camera angle, is you just can't see the props. You know, they pop into view when you get down at lower camera angles, depending on how far back on the quad the camera is mounted and its field of view. But if you really can't see the camera at all, or if you've got footage of the quad coming off of the start line and all you can see is sky, then that's a pretty good indication that the video you're now watching is with a very, very high camera angle, and if the pilot looks like they're yawing through the corners, they aren't, they're rolling through the corners. Anyway, that was the point of this video, and I hope it's helpful in understanding what it is you're seeing when you're watching FPV videos.